Hello, everyone. So excited to see you all. We have a special guest today from BoardReady, Claudia Longo. I'll be introducing her in a moment. Really excited for this conversation and this topic. If everyone could pop in the chat where you're joining us from, that way we kind of see who's out there, where you're all at. And then fun fact, I'm in Portland, Maine as usual. And Claudia is where are you in Colorado?
I'm in Telluride right now.
Yeah, she's joining us from vacation. So really appreciate her taking some time out to have this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, pop in the chat where you're at. That way we can see where everyone is. And I'll get us started because Claudia and I have a ton of content to talk through about board readiness and the organization that she represents, and then how you can really launch your board career. So to get us started, I'm Debra Boggs, CEO of D&S Executive Career Management. We are a firm that works with senior leaders, typically VP, C-level, and certainly board level leaders, to prepare for and navigate the high-level search. So we're not a search firm. We don't do placements, but we're like the home stagers to make a luxury property look expensive before it goes on the market. And a lot of our work is working with candidates that are looking to launch their board careers or looking to launch from private board directorship to public companies. And so we do a lot around, the board candidacy pieces. So that's us in a nutshell. If you want to learn about our work, reach out to Carmen Poff on our team. I know she's going to pop in the chat her link to meet with her. And I would like to introduce Claudia. Really excited to have her on this call because she is Managing Director of BoardReady, and she helps companies build stronger, more forward-thinking boards by connecting them with top talent. She works closely with BoardReady team and its network of executives, ensuring companies have access to the right resources and leaders to drive impact in the boardroom. A little bit more about Claudia. She's a dynamic leader and social entrepreneur. She's also the founder of MS I'm Possible, a nonprofit dedicated to empowering young adults living with multiple sclerosis. Her commitment to driving meaningful change extends beyond boardrooms and nonprofits, as she has shared her insights on resilience and leadership on platforms like TEDx, where she spoke about transforming challenges into opportunities for impact. So excited. Welcome, Claudia. BoardReady and this amazing platform are strategic partners of D&S Executive Career Management. So I'd love to know a little bit more about the platform and what you all do.
Well, thanks so much, Debra, for the great introduction. I'm so happy to be here. BoardReady is a 501c3 organization really dedicated to increasing diversity of thought in the boardroom. We believe there's a need to expand networks in the boardroom, and so that's really what we do. We started and, we were formed about 5 years ago. Our two founders, Deanna Oppenheimer and Phyllis Campbell, are two very seasoned board directors. And our mission was born out of their lived experiences of just realizing the need for more diversity of thought in the boardroom. And so 5 years ago, it really started as an Excel sheet to bring together some qualified directors that they could tap into when they got a call about an open board seat. And 5 years later, we've gotten pretty specific on what we do. So I know we'll kind of go into a lot of that in a bit, but our talent vault is filled with almost 1,000 diverse and qualified candidates that are ready for their first or their next seat in the boardroom. And we tap into that network when we are working with corporate clients for a search. So they'll come to us and give us criteria of who they're looking for, and then we'll pump out a list of about 5 names of folks that we believe are a great fit for their board. So the Talent Vault obviously can connect to opportunities like that. It also has, this large strategic partner network, including folks like yourself. We host quite a few events as well, so in-person and virtual events. And then outside of that, we have what's called our BoardReady Index, and that is our analytic tool that allows us to capture a board's composition based on 5 metrics, which is gender, race, average age span, and tenure. And again, we believe that really contributes to a board's culture and its performance. So it's great that we have actually, an analytic tool that can measure that.
That's amazing. Okay, so I'm going to throw a surprise question in there because I didn't know about the analytic tool and I'm really excited about it. How have you seen things change in those analytics over the years? Have you noticed any changes over the last couple of years, or what does that
That's a great question, especially in today's world. We constantly reevaluate that tool. We were just having a conversation of maybe we need to think about geography. How does that come into play? Are you a first gen? Is that something we should be talking about? So I think as we take a step back and look at the big picture of these diverse perspectives in the boardroom, what are some other things that we can think about outside of those 5 things? I think what's really important to note, and really what ties into what our two founders believe, is we just need more turnover and refreshment on boards, right?
Yes.
We look at public company data, and there's directors that have been on the board since before the 2000s, which, they probably bring great expertise, but there's also probably newer, younger directors that can tell us a bit more about AI, than they could. So there's a
Right.
lot of things that, go into play there.
Oh, that's so interesting. I read an article this morning, and I'll pop it in the chat because I do not remember who wrote it. But about how you need to have that breadth of experience, but also the ability to learn and grow in your field, because you can't just rely on experience, right? As a long tenured board member. So I'd love to know, you guys are doing such amazing work in matching companies with potential board members. And, we get this question a lot from our candidates, because we prepare the candidates for the search, and then they say, okay, well, I'm getting reached out to by this board platform or that board platform. What I love about BoardReady is that you are nonprofit and you're doing it to make good matches, right? And you're doing it to diversify people in the boardroom. And so I'd love to know a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of what companies are looking for in board directors. What makes someone a board ready candidate?
Yeah, that's a great question and a good call out. It's something that you talked about early on. We're not a search firm. What we
Mm-hmm.
do is we facilitate introductions between clients that are looking to expand and strengthen their board. And we align that with the candidates that we have in our network. I think in terms of certain criteria, we work with pre-IPO companies, we work with private companies, some public companies as well. So that is a whole range of criteria, right? But at the core, what we're seeing is the old narrative of you have to be a CEO isn't always the case anymore. So we're seeing
Oh, wow.
gov chairs and CEOs and all these people saying, we are just looking for top talent. Is there a leader that's navigated, change in disruptive times, and how can they really contribute to the boardroom effectively? Another thing is, what's their board experience? Have they been on a nonprofit board? Have
Mm.
they know a bit about governance? How have their interactions been with other board members? That's another interesting thing. And then I think the last thing to think about in terms of what makes a strong candidate is, just as much as the board will give criteria, what is the criteria that the candidate has of what and who they're looking for? Is it a
Mm.
good industry fit? Is it a good cultural fit? Right? It is a two-way street. And so
Yeah.
I think as much as leaders want to land that first board seat, you also have to think about, well, is this a good board seat for me as well?
That is such an important question. And I will dovetail off of that to talk a little bit about the candidate journey. To be, if you've got the board experience, if you've got the experience to be a board director, then what does that candidate journey look like? And it really starts with what you just said, of a clear picture of the kinds of organizations you want to serve. Because without knowing that clear understanding of your ideal board seat and where you'd be uniquely equipped to serve, then it's really hard to build out a strong narrative in your board resume, your board bio, your LinkedIn profile, your networking opportunities, all of that. So I think that's such an important place to start. And so many board candidates will come to us and say, oh, I've been a CEO in XYZ industry, but I can really work in any industry. I can really help any company grow. But really, boards aren't necessarily looking for generalists, right? They're looking for someone who can help them overcome their challenges right now. And so understanding the company size, public, private, PE backed, VC, on the cusp of IPO, all of those things that come with different challenges. And you need a different set of experience. And so when we work with candidates, we really start with, okay, what is ideal? And then let's build your unique value as a board member, because the skills are different. The skills you're being hired for are to be a strategic advisor, not a tactical leader. There's a big saying in the board space of, it's nose in, fingers out, right? You're being brought in to do something different. And so we really think through how to position you focused on those board specific skills and experiences that matter, like you said. And that's one thing that we really work on with our candidates, is they have change management, turnarounds, any of those things that would matter, that can help a company through something that's going on, right? And then, the big question we get all the time is, do I need a board resume? Do I need a board bio? Or, what does that look like? And from our experience, interviewing dozens of board level recruiters, non-gov committees, things like that, is that we typically would say both, because a board resume is going to be a narrative, or like a resume format, but focused differently, right, on your board specific skills. But some boards ask for the resume, some ask for the bio, and some ask for both. So we like to do both just so you have a complete package of documents for your portfolio and ready in case they ask for whatever it is they may ask for. Um, but having said that, they're going to say the same thing. They're going to be positioning you for the roles using your unique value. And then you're going to build that into LinkedIn too. We don't, everyone on this call is probably adept at using LinkedIn, but you want to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is putting your best foot forward as a board candidate, because everyone's going to be looking there and it's your first opportunity to make a strong impression. So don't sleep on that. Don't spend all your time on the resume and then ignore LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Well, and if I can add to that too, I think what we've seen, we now have a portal where our candidates will, fill out all of their information and we can do a keyword search. And so we've seen clients that give us pretty specific criteria, that all do the search. And it turns out we have 7 candidates that fit this very, very specific criteria. So I think spending time, to your point, on the board resume, on LinkedIn, on these databases that you're in, for our portal, you can log in and access it at any point and keep all your information up to date. And that really is pivotal when we do the search and we're filtering through all these profiles. The ones that come out at us are the ones that are updating and the ones that have that really specific criteria. So when we do the search, they're popping right up.
Oh, I love that. Okay. So let's go out of order on our questions a little bit, because I'd love to push on that a little bit more. Tell us more about the portal and how a candidate can use it as part of their search strategy.
Right. So the Talent Vault portal that we're talking about is how we house all of our candidate information. This is free to join. So we do not charge our candidates to be a part of our network.
Wow.
All that happens is, I think, there might be a link in the chat for folks to join. So you sign up, you enter all of your information. Typically takes around 20 to 30 minutes to fill it out. If you have a board bio, it's great to put it in there. A resume, it asks for demographic information, your industry experience, your functional expertise. Once you fill that out, you're in the Talent Vault. What that does is a few things. One, I've already covered, is this opportunity when we are working with corporate clients and we do, a search, there's a chance that then you could be highlighted on the shortlist. Similarly, we have some really great partners, just like yourself. So if you're looking for some board readiness resources, that's not something that we have per se, but we have democratized a ton of great resources. You can find all of those on the portal. And then again, I mentioned this earlier, but events, right? We haven't talked about networking yet, but that's a huge piece to this puzzle, is the networking piece. And so that's something that we aim to do through the portal, through in-person events, through virtual events, because we know, how much that plays in here. We always come back to our term board members for board members. So we were started by board members to benefit board members. We also tap into, the seasoned board directors that are in our network to open doors for some of our aspiring candidates. So it's kind of a self-feeding system, if you can call it that.
That is so fantastic and so incredibly important, because you're right. The board seats are typically filled through networking, right? They're not typically posted online. They may, public companies and larger companies may enlist a search firm to support that. But the best data we can find on how many seats are filled through search firms is only about 15%. And the rest of that is through networking. And so you really need to lean on platforms like yours and networking organizations that can actually open doors for you and can really kind of get you to that next level, and that you can open doors for others as well. And I love the way that you do this and have democratized it by making it free. There's a lot of platforms that are not, but I love the work that you're doing. And so, who makes a good candidate for engaging with your Talent Vault? And then, if Carmen is watching, if you could pop the link to join the Talent Vault in the chat, that'd be great too.
Yeah. So again, since the Talent Vault is free to join, whether you've never sat on a board or you've been on 5 public company boards, the Talent Vault is for you. And what we've really done and honed in, in the last year is gotten very specific with groups in the Talent Vault. So what we offer an aspiring board director, for example, might look a little bit different than what we're doing with our folks that have a portfolio of board companies. And so I think wherever you're at in the journey, the good news is if you come to us, I think we have the ability to either connect you to resources that we have or refer out to some of our partners. Just thinking off the top of my head now, we have plenty of lawyers that come to us. And while that might be outside of my realm of how to, help a lawyer navigate their board career, We have Direct Women has been a great partner of ours, and so we can
Mhm.
send them right over there. So I think no matter where you're at, we do have the ability to point you to board opportunities, point you to partners, and provide some resources there.
Oh, that's great. That makes so much sense. I love the work that you're all doing. Oh, and it looks like that link is in the chat now, so that's really helpful. Thanks, Carmen. Speaking of, quick shout out for Carmen Poff. She's our Director of Client Success. And so if anyone wants to learn about how to work with D&S Executive Career Management on your board assets, right, to be a candidate, your board resume, your board bio, LinkedIn, your search strategy, all those things, reach out to Carmen. Um, and then certainly the link to the Talent Vault for BoardReady is in the chat as well. This is great. So I'd like to talk a little bit about something you mentioned earlier, really briefly, but it's something that comes up a ton when we're talking to our candidates about, when they're talking about their skills gaps. Maybe they've been a CEO, but they don't have any direct board experience. And we talk about their board adjacent work, right? Things that they've maybe, reported to a board, things like that. But what comes up all the time is governance. So talk to me a little bit about the importance of understanding corporate governance as a board member and what you can do if that's a skill gap for you.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. A few things. Number one, nonprofit boards are a great way to learn about governance. I know we mentioned that earlier. So joining a nonprofit board is good because, you can learn about governance. You can also network with other maybe board directors that are in private or public company boards. So that's a great way. The NACD has some really, really great resources on governance. We're based in Seattle. Obviously, our reach is national. But there's a board directors program at the University of Washington where you spend 2 days hearing from board directors on governance and learning, all of that. So I think now more than ever, there are some really great classes and courses. At the same time, going back to what you've said, a lot of times we have folks come to us and in their operating careers, they've had experience reporting to boards and working with boards.
Yeah.
There's so much to learn from that. I'm even thinking of myself in a very small scale, right? As the managing director of BoardReady, I report to the board. And so when
Mm-hmm.
I'm on the board and I'm reporting, what's important for me to think about is not just how I'm reporting to them, but how are they asking me questions? Because again, I'm sitting in a room with some very seasoned board directors, and there's so much for me to learn as I'm
Yes.
reporting to them. How are they acting? What questions are they asking? When are they asking questions? So using those opportunities, maybe you're not a board director, but to your point, there's that board adjacency piece. And what can you pull from those experiences to really learn as well? So probably a two-part piece there.
That's a really great it's a great insight and really helpful. And I tell our candidates too, understanding board governance is helpful too to give you the language you're going to need when you walk into the board level interview, right? When you walk into, you're going to need some of that language, and so brushing up through the programs, right? That a lot of the schools have programs, especially the Ivy League schools, large universities, like you had mentioned. NACD has some great ones. Quick plug for the Private Directors Association, PDA. For private company board directors, I love PDA. I am a member and I'm on the programming committee. So just
Okay.
side note, but they do some really great programs for for private companies, right? And so when it comes to board governance, but it is an important piece to at least have a base level understanding.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to tie that back. I know we've talked briefly, how do you know if you're ready to pursue a board, right? So I think sometimes people think you have to be this governance expert to sit
Right.
on your first board. And the reality is a board opportunity can come whether you're expecting it or not. I was just talking to one of our Talent Vault candidates who, was a public company CFO, had heard about boards, but hadn't really considered it yet. Was at a social event for one of her kids. I think it must have been, a soccer game or whatever it was, and started chatting to what at the time was the NomGov chair. And so they ended up talking, and that is how, she landed her first seat in the boardroom. And that's really how her board career took off. So
Wow.
I think it's important to realize that yes, the governance piece is important and doing all your due diligence in the back is really great. But the reality is you might get plucked whether you're expecting it or not. And so how can you get ready, be ready, stay ready.
Oh, I love
And
that.
you'll learn as you go, right? As a first-time director, in our experience, in my experience, I don't think the board is expecting you to be perfect, but again, you can learn as you go.
Right. And this is so important. And especially for women, I think we have to be the experts before we can put our name in the hat, right?
Yeah.
Before we can try to focus on something. And you don't necessarily need to be the expert in the room. You need to be an expert in your function. You need to be able to advise C-level leaders in whatever types of organizations you want to be a board director for. But you certainly don't need to be the world's most, premier leader in board governance, right? You'll figure it out. But we have to put our name out there eventually, or people won't know. And that's the other thing is I love your point about talking to someone on the soccer field, right? Because if we don't tell people what we're looking for and have a super clear focus, then we don't open ourselves up to opportunities. I actually talked to a candidate just this morning, just landed an offer for a C-level role. And it came about through she shares a personal trainer with someone who knew of a C-level opportunity, right? Like outside work, you're not even in work mode, right? When you're in exercise classes, things like that. But it opened a door to a C-level opportunity that she wouldn't have known otherwise. But she was able to have the conversation about what she was looking for, tell people she's looking, because we need to remember we're not going to get plucked out of obscurity, right?
Yeah.
How are we telling people what we're looking for and being open and saying, here's where I can add value?
Absolutely. And I think that's also an important call out because sometimes this is what we've seen, right? Is we have executives that are nearing retirement and then they kind of stop and then they think about boards. And at that
Oh
point,
yeah,
they've kind of put themselves in a silo of just thinking about boards. Whereas, before they get there, maybe they're in their operating career, just start planting the seed, learning more. Because if you get to a point where all you can think about is board work, you're going to lose yourself along the way.
right.
That's one little piece to the puzzle. It's how are you showing up in your operating career? How are you
Yep.
showing up on a nonprofit board? How are you showing up at the soccer field? Because you never know who's going to be there and who has access to the boardroom. So I think not thinking about a board journey in silo is so important because, again, your talent could be recognized whether you're at your day job or let's just keep coming back. I'm a soccer player, so I have to keep coming back to this
I
analogy.
love it.
So I think that's an important piece too, is it's not just this one track lane. There's a lot of different pathways to the boardroom.
Right. That's so incredibly important. I'm so glad you brought that up because you're right. And I'd like to touch on something that you had said about, when people retire and then they start thinking about board work. This happens with us all the time too. Candidates will call us and say, okay, I retired 6 months ago. Now I'd like to start a board career. It's so much easier to start your board career if you're winding your career down, right? Versus waiting till after retirement, because now you're not in the rooms, you're not in the professional development associations, your industry trade organizations, things like this. You know what I mean? And it becomes harder, not impossible, but harder. And so, what I like to say is if you're thinking about your second act of your board career, start planting those seeds 5 years before you retire, right?
Mhm.
Or, if you want to start maybe building a board portfolio career for after retirement, retire a little early, that's something you need time to start building, right? And so I think a lot of people think, okay, well, now, I've got this deep experience. I've got 30 years in my industry. Everyone's going to want me for a board seat. The search is harder than that, right? The search is going to be very much like an executive job search, which if anyone's heard me speak before, you've heard me say it's a completely different animal, is lengthy, it's time consuming, it's a lot of effort. And that's the same for a board seat. And
Right.
so planting the seed ahead of time, starting to network, starting to tell people what you're interested in, getting in the right rooms, having a clear picture of what that looks like will really help make that transition much easier because otherwise, if you're a CEO and you retire cold turkey, and Claudia and I were talking about this a little bit offline, it can be really, really difficult to then find your way back because it's so jarring, right? To go from working, 80 hours a week to now not doing anything. And I don't know about you all, but the idea of retirement is honestly scarier to me than the idea of working the rest of my life. And that's something that maybe, I could talk to someone about, but that's a different conversation. But it does take some pre planning and some thought and process.
Well, and I think the good news is today in 2025, we have folks like yourself and your company. We have folks like our two founders, Deanna and Phyllis, who have done such a great job trailblazing this path. So
Mm.
now women and people of color and even men, I mean, everyone's starting to think about board
Yeah.
service early on in their careers. And now more than ever, there's so many great resources. So while you're still, relevant and operating, how can you start tapping into some of those resources to kind of get you one step ahead?
Yeah, absolutely. And you bring up a good point about men in the boardroom. I know this. I know Board Ready certainly works with mostly women, people of color in the boardroom. A ton of opportunities. Still, the majority are going to what we like to say are legacy board candidates, right? Are white men. There are still opportunities. So I don't want anyone to feel discouraged, right? This conversation is really for everyone. But
Mhm.
the thing that happens is now you have to show up differently. You have to really compete in a way that you may not have had to in the past because now um, the pool is a lot larger, right? And so that changes the way everyone shows up in your resume, in your interview process, in your networking. You still need to be really, really clear on your focus and telling a strong value proposition because there are more people putting their name in the hat for opportunities now.
There are, and I think to your point, our talent vault is open to everyone. So we do have, the white male in our talent vault, and I think they are some of our most important allies and advocates. I'm just thinking off the top of my head right now. Ed Thomas out of Deloitte, who's done just great work with the Onboarding Woman program. He's opened so many doors, and so I think this is a big part of this space of while Board Ready, yes, is focused on increasing diversity of thought in the boardroom, it's a whole picture. So that means maybe we have white males that are allies, but also they might be the ones that are fit for this board role, and we would put them on a short list. So it's for us, we have this wide range of how we look at diversity. So we have a really unique ability when we create these short lists of who we're pulling from the talent vault.
I love that. And I love that you have men in the talent vault. And I think this is so important, especially for our female board directors or aspiring board directors, really, because I see a lot of women focus on women's only organizations. And the hard thing is because board seats are typically open through our network, if you only networking with women, you're not necessarily, opening your doors for each other in a way that you could if you're with people that are sitting on boards, right? And so I think that diversity. I think someone in the comments earlier said no silos allowed. Absolutely, opening
Yeah.
yourself up to everyone. And back to PDA real quick because I see a comment in the chat here. Is male and female, and I like that a lot about the program. And the national conference chair Rebecca Wing said the conference is in Disneyland. In October, right? I can't wait. Never been to Disneyland, so I'm
There
gonna
you
take that
go.
opportunity. But thanks
Yeah.
for that. But yeah, it's so important, I think, and I'm glad you called that out about the talent vault. Um, so we have a couple of minutes left. What's next for Board Ready? What do you guys have on the horizon? And I'd love to have people know how they can get in touch with you.
Absolutely. Well, the good news is our team is growing. And so we now have a gal who's really focused on the Talent Vault side. So for anybody that's interested in joining the Talent Vault, you can join with the link that Carmen put in there. We're
Okay.
also happy to hop on an intro call and explain. I know this was a lot today that we've discussed. So happy to explain all of that in more detail. I think, to address the elephant in the room, now more than ever, the work we're doing is so important, and how we're talking about
Mhm.
it is so interesting because it's what we believed all along. It's that boards need refreshment. They need to expand their networks. And here at Board Ready, given what we do, we have a really unique ability to meet that need. So we're not slowing down. We've
Love
been
that.
working with a lot of fantastic clients who really, are advocating for the folks that are in our talent vault. And again, to go back to what we talked about at the beginning, obviously our goal is to lead, the connections we make for them to lead to placements. But really what we're seeing when we take a step back is that we are just expanding networks for aspiring directors, for people in the boardroom. Maybe it leads to an advisor role. Maybe it
Yes.
leads to once a month the board chair has given them a call just to pick their brain on some things. So I think, different ways to get into the boardroom there has been really, really fascinating. But again, we're not slowing down. The good news is our two co-founders aren't slowing down either. They both apparently retired a couple years ago, but that could not have been further from the case because they are more passionate than ever. So it's all great here. And again, we're just very, very grateful for this partnership. As I mentioned, we don't have a whole lot of programming on our side of board bios and LinkedIn presence. And so when we have folks that come to us asking for that, it's been great to refer out to, our trusted partners with D&S.
I really appreciate that. This partnership has been so amazing, and likewise, we love to send our candidates your way because we trust the way that you all do business in your organization and the nonprofit work that you do in this space is just so incredibly valuable. So I really appreciate this partnership. Thank you so much, Claudia.
Yes, thanks so much, Debra.
All right. Thanks everyone for joining us. As we hop off here, I'd love for everyone to pop in the chat what your takeaway was today, what your top tip or what you're going to use to help your own board journey. I would love to see what resonated with everyone. Thanks, everyone.